Tony, when you were when you had this image up on the screen, I almost interrupted you. I got excited. Well, also it's such a freaky image, but I think part of the point this image makes, what's wrong with it, and it's worth talking about because so many architects, not that they like to do a truly mirrored glass, but reflective glass, so huge sheets of glass that just come down to the sidewalk with no kind of definition. Part of what a facade has to do as part of the street wall is have a presence, is have an edge. Yeah. And looking at this one, it was an extreme example of you don't know where the edge is. Right. The one side of the street is reflected of the other, and with that little kind of raised walkway, which may have something to do with ADA, I remember just being strange, but you don't really know where you are, in part because you don't know where the edge is.
Well, that makes me think, you make me think of the whole thing you're taught in design about the container that the public realm is. So for those of you viewing this, we are talking about one facade edge to another facade edge. So you exit this building, and the minute you exit it, there's an exterior wall, and you might come to a dooryard, you might come up to a front yard, whatever it is, sidewalk, street, repeat on the other side, sidewalk, dooryard, building. That facade to facade is that area you're talking about, that edge that you're saying that you want to feel, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's often form-based codes kind of tied up with urbanism, which often gets tied up with historical or stylistic issues. It's not about the style of the facade. Some of the best modernism I've seen is in infill buildings where the architects have done a really handcrafted, very careful design of a facade, but it's still a facade. It's still something that's there and shaped. It's not just a big sheet of glass that reflects on you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about providing individuality in your design and responding to the context, but just to emphasize what you're saying, that the facade needs to play its part in defining that street edge, to make that room, that enclosure we were talking about, to do its part. And I think a lot of designers, they say, I'm going to do my own thing. And that's good to a point. You have to do your part in being that continuous facade of buildings, whether they're separated or not. Each building is doing its part to hold that edge and create that outdoor room.
It's synergy.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a collection of things that happen to be adjacent.
Cacophony, is the opposite.
One of my favorite words.
The other point I'd like to make here while we're talking about facades is that we've been showing a lot of Midwest and East Coast examples that are heavy on the masonry. And while we enjoy those, we are not saying or advocating here that you can't do it unless you use masonry. In fact, a lot of the examples that Jeff and I also talk about don't use masonry. They're exposed, they're stucco, or they're wood, something else. And so we are not trying to advocate for you to spend more money on your building. We're simply advocating for you to put the building in the right assembly, and put it in the right location, make it the right height where it needs to be the right height, so that it performs and functions well over time, a long period of time hopefully, and it shapes that positive space.
Should we go and talk about, I loved your diagram when you were talking about the transitions, and we're going to talk about it a lot in neighborhoods and corridors, but let me go to the next slide. This where the building, instead of, and I think part of the root of this is in conventional zoning, and this, of course, you can, there are different ways to approach it, and you can try and do add-ons, but at its base, the paradigm isn't thinking about the building as a specific form or shaping the public space. And when you think about that building as just a lump of FAR, then it's kind of all the same. In form-based coding, and it's because we know it's important, we've added that issue of the physical form of the building is something we're working with to begin with, but we're thinking about streets and blocks. So it's something in our practice we dub it neighborhood manners. So that where you meet a building, and this diagram is a pretty good illustration of that very same thing. That building that has the 4-story bar across the front and then the 2 or 3-story wings on the back, that building may be the same building mass as the big 4-story block, right, or it may even be bigger.
Right.
but to the neighbors behind it in terms of the presence over their backyard, etc. It makes a nice transition, and it's a complementary relationship.
Right, but there's nothing in current zoning codes to compel them to do that, and guidelines, unless they're written with an intent to get at certain outcomes, they're still going to be sort of aiming in the right direction, but not giving enough direction to come to these kinds of solutions. People glue things onto the building or make it more interesting visually, but if you really want to get to the root of the matter, you've got to deal with the form, the volumes plural of the building.
And it's such a basic thing.
Right,
It's not going to happen by accident.
Yeah. This is not rocket science. It's it's relatively simple, but there are so many distractions in conventional zoning and in the way design guidelines are written. Not that we're against design guidelines, but we're against guidelines that don't really get you to the outcomes. They just confuse the matter. So we're advocating for you to think harder about the adjacencies between neighbors, neighbors, and particularly single-family neighborhoods and corridor buildings, or buildings that are bigger than neighborhoods.
Thank you for joining us for Course 2. We're going to invite you to attend Course 3, which follows up, focusing on neighborhoods, and it starts to get into more detail in a lot of these issues. And
please make sure to fill out the feedback evaluation form online and take the quiz, see what you've learned, and maybe that'll inform your feedback. And we just want to thank you very much and look forward to seeing you in the next course.